coming tonight. We're having a panel for Prepare2Vote. Prepare2Vote was started to sort of connect the dots between government and voting. And I'm going to start with an intro video. I think he says it best.
Hi, I'm Ali. I got involved with Prepare2Vote because I grew up seeing how civics and civic participation as a whole can shape people's lives. I come from a family that is refugees from Kashmir, the area in between India and Pakistan. And so politics shaped their life. It brought them here to the U.S. And so my parents made sure to never take that for granted. But in this country, a lot of young people feel shut out of that political process. And Prepare2Vote is one of the few organizations that's doing a phenomenal job in working to bring them back into that fold. So some of the work I've done with Prepare2Vote, last year, I created and taught a Civics Week program, which is a mini unit at my school about civics. And we cover topics like gerrymandering, campaign finance, and local government, all from the perspective of how government actually impacts students, from their main street to their classrooms. And what struck me was how quickly students became engaged with the topic once they understood how power actually works and how it shapes them in particular, and how involved they can be in making decisions that impact themselves and their families. Something I think Prepare2Vote is all about. It connects civic life, civic education, feel like, oh, these are the rules to memorize, 3 branches of government, almost as if politics is a foreign language, and connects it directly to people's lives, from who fixes your potholes to who keeps your libraries open. That's something that I have seen firsthand. Prepare2Vote does remarkably well. But it's not just an organization that helps just young people. It also helps people of all ages get involved in civics. I can speak personally for volunteering to register homeless people to vote. That's something I haven't heard a lot of organizations do. I think it's remarkably special because those are some of the most vulnerable people in society, and so they are impacted the most when governments change. And so it makes perfect sense for them to have a voice in the process. And so as a whole, we talk about democracy. It's something that all Americans hear about. Many of us, hopefully the majority of us, poll after poll shows believe in, and for good reason. But in order for democracy to work, in order for us to have a belief in it that actually makes sense and is well-founded, all of us need to be involved in it. And that's why I think organizations like Prepare2Vote are so valuable, because this nonprofit has made sure that all people across Jersey and hopefully expanding are engaged with the civic process. Because without that engagement, the whole process falls apart.
And he does the best introduction that I couldn't do any better. I want to start with introducing one of my other fantastic advisory board members, Sadie Novak. Sorry about that. And Sadie's going to do the questions, and we've got these great young voters here to talk about their experiences and what may bring them back to the fold next year.
Yes, I just want to thank you all again for being here for our Citizen Civics panel discussion on why some voters are turning out, and discussing ways we might be able to encourage some of these folks to tune back in. So to start us off, I'd like for our panelists to go down the line, introduce yourselves, provide just a little bit of background on who you are. So I'll start with Collin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Collin Smith. I am a former staffer for Senator Troy Singleton down in the good old 7th Legislative District, where I served as his outreach coordinator for 6 years. When it came time for me to spread my wings and fly out of the legislative nest, I transitioned to the Burlington County Institute of Technology. That is the county vote tech school, where I currently serve as their admissions coordinator, going around the county, talking to middle school and high school students about vote tech education and how the opportunities are there with them to invest in a skilled trade. When I'm not working at BCIT, I am also serving as a volunteer for the Free All Minds Academy program, where I mentor young men ages 14 to 18.
Hi everyone, my name is Justin Wang, and I'm a very recent addition to this panel. But currently I'm a research scientist at the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. My work involves taking all the data and research that comes out of our department and using that to improve programs. It's kind of this quality improvement process. And before that, last year, I was part of this fellowship program, the Eagleton Science Fellows program at Rutgers University, placing PhD level scientists in local or state government positions in different departments, and I was placed at Children and Families. And before that, I did my PhD in molecular biology, but I was really looking for opportunities to get involved in government, in decision making, and helping people out through that instead of necessarily just sticking solely on academic research.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Swann. I studied at Rutgers Camden Business School. I have a marketing degree, and right now I'm also in insurance and work as a bartender. Here to have my opinion and hear others.
I'm Amanda Walton. I am a business financial administrator for a marketing company, working with a consumer healthcare company as our client. I am also a part-time server and bartender at PJ Williams in Medford Lakes. And I'm just here I'm not the typical every year voter, so probably the perfect client for this situation.
Yeah, you were definitely perfect addition to this panel. Obviously we really want to talk about why people are going to the polls, why people aren't going to the polls, and each of these panelists bring a different perspective and have different experiences when it comes to voting. And so tonight's discussion is really to delve into that, hear a little bit about their experiences, and talk about what kinds of things a voter might want and need to feel prepared to go to the polls. So for our first question, it's an easy one, but I just want to know about the first time you went to vote. What got you to the polls, what you remember about your first time voting. So we'll go in reverse order this time, so I'll start with Amanda.
Okay. My first time voting was actually the 2008 election where we elected President Obama. I was a senior in high school leading up to that election, and my history teacher had us do a project to figure out where we stood on different issues and try and figure out what candidates we aligned with the most. So that actually had me very excited for my first chance to vote in a presidential election. But from there, it just kind of fell off, and the only elections that I've voted in since have been presidential. I'm not very involved when it comes to yearly elections.
My first presidential election was in 2016. That was the first time I went, and I was very excited to see female in office running. And I've done every presidential voting since, but this year was my first voting for state. I guess that comes with age and maturing and doing more research and learning how important it really is.
The first time I voted was in the 2020 presidential election, and I think the only reason why I did that was because I was in grad school at the time. I seem to remember we got some time off on that day, and my friend said, "Why don't we go vote?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So I probably wouldn't have even made that active decision if my friend hadn't offered to do so. But then that was the first time. Every year after that, I think I was at the polls. I was registered to get a mail-in ballot every year after that. So then I just got these every year after that. I'm like, wow, this is so convenient. And that made it much easier for me to vote after that.
So the first time that I was eligible to vote was the 2012 presidential election, and I'm not sure if everyone recalls that same year Hurricane Sandy happened. So I was up in Montclair State at the time, and I drove all the way back down here because I was a resident of Mount Laurel, and I actually took my friend with me to cast my first vote, only because back in high school during the 2008 election, I was off by just a couple of months to vote, and then having all my friends that were eligible to vote at the time, talking about the excitement that they felt about it. And I just said to myself, my time is going to come. But to kind of answer your question, what got me to the polls when it came my time to vote, just was the excitement. And I had a person, actually Nancy was one of them, and somebody else who was running on a county ticket at the time back in, I want to say around the early 2010s-ish years, to where they knocked on my door and they left a door knocking flyer for someone who was on the ticket, and to see at the time Senator Troy Singleton on that flyer kind of inspired me to get to the polls when my time came. So
Very cool. Thank you. So to build on that, my next question for you is what keeps you going to the polls, be it just for the presidential elections or presidential and state and local, and if you don't go to every single election, if you could talk a little bit about what keeps you from going to the polls. We'd love to hear that. We'll start with you this time.
So for me, I feel as though that I have a civic duty to vote. Voting is a privilege, and there's always this saying of, if your vote doesn't really matter, then why are those in power trying to take it away from you? So with that in mind, I always just keep that near and dear to me. So when it comes time to vote every single year in this state, I'm always making it a priority to go out, cast my vote, so I can make sure that I get that sticker at the end.
For me, after that first election that I showed up in person, as I said, I was getting these mail-in ballots, and I was in California at the time. The thing I look forward to the most voting in California was that we would always get these propositions, sometimes a very long list of propositions, and these would get very, let's say, divisive sometimes, and it was fun to feel like you're part of this big, thing where you have one side making this argument, another side, and you get to have the voice in that. You get to be part of the news on the tabloids. They're like, oh, proposition blah 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 has all this support from these people, all this something against those. So I thought it was kind of fun to do that. I didn't really feel as much connected to like the actual people on the ballot, unless it was a presidential or maybe the midterms. But I think over time, as I kept doing those, I got to see more of I think I was able to more understand how politics really affects so many different aspects of our lives. And that's how, after moving to New Jersey, I didn't have, I wasn't automatically getting a mail-in ballot or anything, but I made it a point to go out, get registered to vote, and because I felt like it was really important to a lot of things affecting me and everybody else.
So I don't think anything would stray me away from going to the polls like I always have, and for at least presidential, this was my first time in the state. But I agree with Collin where he says it's a privilege to be able to vote, and every vote does matter, so it will be going. But I feel, like I said before, when you grow up and mature, there's a lot of topics that really matter, and you see how they affect. So that's what got me to go out this year.
As far as I think I'll always continue to do presidential, but I think the in-between stuff, it almost feels like there's not really a chance to actually enact change when we've got 4 years of whoever's in the presidential office. So it can feel like screaming into the void, especially if it doesn't end up the way that I voted. It feels like it doesn't matter. I know logically that everyone can't think that way because then no one's going and no one's affecting change. But it's just, and then there's so much noise that figuring out who stands for what and who can actually make the changes that I would like to see, it's hard to narrow that down.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So for my next question, I think, in 2026 we have our midterm elections coming up, so we are going to be voting for some federal positions. We're going to be voting for our state assembly people. So I would ask for those of you who are going to be voting, what are you most looking forward to? How are you going to be doing your research? What kind of information are you looking for? And for those of you who, haven't really thought about what's happening or, haven't really made that plan yet to get out to the polls, maybe talk about what you would need or what you would want to see information-wise to maybe change that stance. So Jade, I will start with you, and then we'll go to Amanda and circle back.
Okay. So I feel like I would just want everyone to be very clear on the policies. I feel like a lot of the times no one's ever clear enough, and that would determine my vote. There's a lot of things I look in candidates when it comes to voting, definitely women's rights and stuff like that. There's much more, but I feel like if they're very vocal about certain things I care about, it would get me to go vote.
that in addition to, like, if there's easy places to find a good amount of information that's non-biased, because while I know where I stand on certain things, I don't want to feel like I'm just reading something from someone who's telling me what I want to hear. I want to know that they actually stand for the things and how they can put those changes into effect.
So I feel like after the recent presidential election, the stakes are kind of high right now, and it's kind of inspired a lot of people across the country to go out and cast their votes. So for me, you know, I can go out there and find the information needed about where the candidates stand on certain issues. But personally for me, I want to know who the candidate is when the cameras aren't around, when they're not having to work. What type of person are they? What type of morals do they stand for? What are their hobbies? What are their interests? I want to know them authentically as a person when they don't have that title or when they don't have to be on the campaign trail. And that kind of really influences my decision out there as well. So.
And I totally agree with what has been said already. I remember when I was voting in the last election, I live in Princeton, and we had a big school board election, and you could see the signs out on people's lawns everywhere. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll try to look into these people and make an informed choice. And it was sometimes really difficult to find that information. Like, I have to go to different sources, and there's not just. It took a lot of time and effort to try to get that information. And at the end of it, I still didn't feel like I could really make that great of a decision with the information I had. So I totally agree. Like, having a place where you can easily find, here are their policy things that they support, or it's kind of hard to get a good complete picture of somebody unless you really dig into it a lot.
Do you mind if I just touch base on that? With regards to finding information and the difficulties, where we are with social media, where we are with information in general, one of the biggest secrets is actually calling that person's office or calling that person's campaign, which I think a lot of people tend to forget to do. Speaking from a staffer perspective, I can't tell you how many times across the 6 years where I've worked for the senator, where people have contacted our office just to know where the senator has stood on the matter to make their decision. And I'll tell you all out there, seriously, if it is a situation where you want to know about your candidate and they have a phone number, call that phone number. If you don't get an answer, follow up and call that phone number again. If you still don't get an answer, comment on that person's social media page, because chances are they are going to see that, and if they don't have a good image in that, that's going to make them look bad. So we all have phones in this room. It's not just for the internet. Use it for the phone app and dial that phone number and get the answers that you need.
Does anyone have anything? Okay. I mean, you did steal my last question. This one wasn't my last question for you. Like, I think that a really big theme out of this panel is just that it's been important for you to feel informed, to be able to make that decision. So my last question for you is, where have you found, the best resources to feel like you've gotten good information? So I think that is a great example of just going straight to the source and reaching out to your elected officials. But in your experiences, you were saying that as you learned more and understood that there are a lot of other issues to consider, you started showing up to state elections. What kind of information, what resources were really, really important for you? I'll start with you, Justin.
Sure. I think one thing that helped me a lot was local news sources. So especially I'm thinking about the gubernatorial election, and I watched a couple videos from NJ Spotlight News where they hosted the different gubernatorial candidates, and they had these town halls, and I thought that was a really great place where I could see, these are clearly what each of these candidates believes on all these issues, and you can really see them going back and forth on these things. And I thought that was really helpful. It's in one place, and I could feel like I could trust the information coming out of there.
I also agree with him on that. Obviously, I've always gone to my mother. My mother teaches me a lot of what she researches. But I also have found, like, for younger generations, I have gone on, like, TikTok before. And, like, you have to be, you know, smart with that, too, because it can be biased. But I will, like, see certain acts or things I don't know, and I immediately do the research. And I've learned a lot from that. Even with this state's election, I remember there was 9 Democrats, 4 Republicans, I think it was. And I found really great TikTok of people breaking down each person and what they said they were going to do, their beliefs, and especially with, like, education, and SNAP, and women's rights. And so I think that helped me break apart a lot of. So I thought it was good. They give you all the information in like a minute or 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah. I'll be honest, I haven't done enough looking, and that's connected to that I haven't felt the tie to anything outside of presidential elections. And when it comes to, like, the presidential, I really just, with New Jersey being very organized on the ticket, just go down the line.
Yeah.
But now with the way that things are getting, like, chaotic, intense, and everything, like, I definitely will look into the things that these guys have brought up.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, this conversation has kind of provided a foundation for some people to jump off of looking for new resources. I'd also just like to correct for the record, we do not have state elections in 2026. That's 2027. So make sure we have that information up correctly. Sorry about that.
Sadie, do you mind real quick?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on and to kind of piggyback off of what Jade was saying, especially with regards to social media. The way social media is nowadays, the information is going to actually find you. You go to one, you know, elected official or person running for office on their webpage or their social media page, that's when the information is going to start to flood on your timeline, and you're going to constantly see it. So for me, and I'm sure for everybody else in this room, you've seen all the campaign ads, no matter if you're on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You see it on one page, you're going to see it on the other, and then it's up to you as the person to just continue to look into that information and make the best informed decision from there. I actually want to challenge everyone in this room as well, no matter what side you may lean on, to look into the opposition's side as well on things, just so you can get a full scope of what it is that you're trying to learn.
Thank you. Anybody else have any closing remarks? Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to Nancy, and we're going to take questions from.
Does anyone have any questions or comments from the audience? Any input, any thoughts? Anything?
Yes, I have some questions. With the 2026 midterms coming up this year, like, how concerned do you think, like, the voters are regarding, like, voter suppression and, like, and also, like, regarding, like, the president of the United States, like, calling also, like, voter fraud once again, just like echoing 2020. Like, what are the possibilities that's still lingering in the voter's mind?
That's a great question. I don't know if front row seat anymore. Sadie,
I will say that in terms of, I mean, you're asking about, you know, voter fraud and things like that. There are definitely systems in place that are designed to prevent that from happening. So I know that it's going to be a concern, and I think that it's most likely going to continue being a concern. And it is just something that we're going to have to work on in strengthening our systems, making sure people have access to vote, and set up systems that are foundationally strong, but also make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote when they should.
Yeah, I think New Jersey has some of the best voting laws in the country. We don't have same-day voting, but we have vote by mail, there's no questions asked. We try to make it as easy as possible. And I think there is a lot of concern about how elections are going to be run on the federal level in the states. I'm not sure how that's going to be dealt with.
We get early voting too. We had early voting as well.
Yes. So, I think there's a lot of concern. And the SAVE Act, hopefully that won't pass. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but it's going to make it very difficult unnecessarily for people to vote. We have good voting laws right now in place, and we really don't need to make major changes like that. So, yeah.
I'll just even chime in just a little further. It's really up to the people to call on their legislators and voice their concerns with matters such as this upcoming election and the potential policies and bills that are put forth to kind of take away that privilege. So everyone in this room, whether you know that you're voting or not, if you know somebody that doesn't even plan on voting, call them and educate them. Comment on their Facebook statuses or Instagram posts, no matter what it is, just to make them aware of what's going on.
George?
I'd just like to piggyback on Colin's comment. I like the fact that you say reach out to their office and contact them and see what you can generate as far as comments from them. One of the things we've seen in recent years, I think, not that he started it, but U.S. Senator Andy Kim, when he was running for Congress, he declared that if he won, he would hold a town hall every month that he was in office. A lot of candidates, a lot of elected officials have done the same thing. It's not a new thing, but there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and you should enact with a candidate that's willing to put themselves out there and be at public events and speak at different things. Typically, you can pull them aside and ask questions, of them as well. So I think that's a telling sign when a candidate is willing to go the extra yard and make themselves available to the public for questions and concerns.
Absolutely. And if the candidate isn't, then certainly the staffer is, and they'll get back to the candidate.
Does anyone else have anything?
I have a question. I'm interested to know what inspired each of our panelists to participate in tonight's panel discussion.
Anybody want to start?
Nancy bullying me into it.
I love
it. Nancy asked very politely for me to be involved because she knew that I wasn't very involved, especially outside of presidential elections. And she felt like this would be the perfect avenue to get me involved.
To get you involved, and also to point out how, you represent probably 75% of the voters in the country. It's hard to find information. It's hard to do the homework, and you're busy, and we need, I think, elected officials hopefully will see this. I think, we need to listen more, and we need to be out there more. And I wanted to have some working people on this board. I didn't want to have a panel of professionals. I wanted to have a panel of folks that might not vote all the time, with the exception of Collin. He wasn't always a regular voter. So, I mean, you have to be inspired at some point, hopefully now. And Prepare2Vote is here to try to help people, just make it easier for them so they can say, oh, it's not scary, and it's not, I can find this information.
Yeah.
It was the same as Amanda. We work at the same place, and Nancy saw opportunity that we're very much the same, but I think everyone here is different in their unique way, and it's awesome to hear from everyone.
And for me, I was asked just for the event if I would want to serve as a panelist, and I think I was thinking about, I'm much more involved politically now, and I vote all the time now, but as I said, I didn't start voting until 2020, which I was already past college. I had been registered to vote since I got my driver's license, or since I was able to register to vote, I have been registered, but I just never voted, because I never thought it was something that really affected me or applied to me. Politics really wouldn't come up a lot in family conversations, so maybe I was lucky or because of that, but so I just never really thought about it too much until my friend asked me. But now, ever since then, I've realized, I've gotten so much more involved in politics and can see, at least to me, I see the value in it.
So for me, it kind of echoes off of what Jade and Amanda were saying, minus the bullying part. So Nancy actually called me, I want to say it was 2 days before my birthday, asking me if I wanted to be a part of this panel, and I love public speaking. My gift is my voice, so to have this opportunity to speak to others about my story and my experience, about voting, it was a blessing, so I didn't hesitate to say yes.
I hope to hear from Sadie too.
Well, I was asked to moderate, and I was super excited to have this conversation with folks who, were coming from all different backgrounds regarding voting, things like that, and just having that conversation. Just because, I've had experience with friends when, they've told me that they didn't go vote, and it was a really hard conversation for me to have, trying to understand their perspective. But, I have found that engaging these kinds of conversations, you really learn a lot about the gaps and like what is needed to get people prepared to go to the polls. So I was super excited to have this conversation as well tonight. It is to moderate.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Does anyone else have a question or a comment or anything?
I do.
Like that?
Do you guys find that your social groups kind of like lean the same way as you, where they haven't really voted a whole lot, or
That's a very good
like
question.
have you found like do you know? Do you guys talk about it?
I don't talk about it a lot with my groups, so I feel like it probably is that they're similar to me in that they don't participate very often. It's just not a conversation. Also, I grew up in kind of a family that was divided in their politics, so it's one of those things that like we don't talk about politics because then my uncle and my grandfather are button heads and it's not fun. So it just wasn't an everyday conversation in my life.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same for me. Like some people have been divided, like even where we work. So it's something that we just don't bring up unless like it's someone we know we want to talk to. But I don't hear it often, and that could be the younger voters that you are looking for to come out. But people think that their vote doesn't matter when it does.
For myself, I think, yeah, it used to be something I didn't really think about, so I didn't really think about it in my social circles either, but I think now I realize, especially now that I work in the government, that people are definitely much more involved, and I think my friend groups kind of reflect that too.
So for me, within my main circle of friends that I've known for over 20 years, we absolutely do talk about it. The conversations that we've had have been pretty heated to where some friendships have honestly ended, but the ones that have stayed around, we continue to talk about, upcoming elections or certain policies that have been enacted all the way from the federal to the state level to even county levels issues. We keep it cordial. Some days it's not as cordial depending on what the issue may be, but I have friends that are on both sides of the aisle, but when we have the conversations, we're not scared to have those conversations. So, and I respect, my friends that may have opposing issues, similar, or that's not, kind of in line with mine and where we may stand on it. But yes, and this is, what it's all about within the democracy that we live in. We can agree to disagree on some things.
So I grew up in a family, my moms would take me to vote with them. So when my sisters were little, we'd go into the booths with them and see them vote. So my family definitely raised my sisters and I to be very aware of, what voting means and what it means for us to do that. But like Justin, my background is in science, so I would say that my scientist friends, I often hear, we're scientists, and, it's not something that comes to mind first or second or third in conversation. And sometimes, when I try to open those conversations, it does kind of revert back to, we're scientists, we're all about facts, and we're not going to get tied up in that policy stuff. But I think like other social circles, people are a lot more apt to talk about voting and, getting their friends out to vote. So it's been very interesting to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the interesting things that we talked about when I knew you before you got involved with Prepare2Vote was your conscious decision. You started to realize that funding from the government, you're being in the lab.
Yeah.
Yes, count on that.
Absolutely, and it is directly tied to politics because those usually decide where the money's going to go, what's going to be studied. And, you know, when you're working in a lab, you need money to fund your lab.
Yeah. I think that's one of those little aspects that a lot of people don't realize. There are people that say, I don't want to be political, and honestly, if politics goes a different direction, their life can change, one way or another. So I think it's really important to know that. Does anyone else have any questions?
It's funny you say that, Nancy, because I think of the saying, if you don't want to be involved in politics, then politics is going to find you. So
It will.
there you go.
So, in closing remarks, Prepare to Vote, I mean, we're trying to make things easier for folks that aren't as involved as they think maybe they should be, or that I think they should be. And we're also trying to build bridges and have those conversations. Sit down and talk to people from, you know, every walk of life, meet them where they are, and try to make it feel less scary and more important, and how their life connects. Like, we have brochures that's, you know, whose pothole is this? And it explains. Sometimes it's local government, sometimes it's county, sometimes it's state, that kind of thing. Just make it simple, keep it fun as you can, and that's why we're here. So there's donation cards on the tables if anyone's interested in even $5 would be really helpful. We are doing Homeless Not Vote. This is one of our programs where we're going to shelters and registering voters in the shelters. And Alexis helped me out with that one. I forget how many we registered and checked their registrations, and everybody but 3 voted. So it was a good number.
Yeah, it was great question. My brain goes 30 or 60, and one of those 2 is correct.
Yeah, great.
But it was a good amount. And what was really cool about that was, you know, my favorite moment in that night was one of the guys was like, oh, I can't vote because I have a felony. And Nancy was like, wait, hold up, laws have changed, you can totally vote with a felony. And he was like, wait a minute, hold on. And he like runs out of the room and he goes and grabs like 3 more guys. My friends have to know this. And he like drags them in and he's like, you can vote and you have to vote. And like that for me was like so impactful of like knowing that like these are guys who have been passively disenfranchised because, you know, they just didn't know the policy had changed and there was no one there to tell them that. There are so many ways our homeless friends are left out in the cold in a literal way. And, you know, so this effort to bring voter registration into our homeless shelters is actually, like, again, like that was for me. I was like, oh, so we've changed some lives today as well. So yeah, so really good.
They were excited about it.
Yeah, it was fun one. Like, again, folks who didn't think they could, and then on top of that, to then have the shelter be like, yeah, we have a policy of transporting to the polls if they need to. And we were like, did anybody know that? We didn't know. I mean, I didn't know that. So that was really cool as well.
And hopefully they'll tell their friends and those numbers will increase.
Right, absolutely. Well, and you know, the goal is to do it quarterly because, you know, the shelter community changes as folks get to go home, to a new home, and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So our goal is to build bridges, try to make this, try to take some of the mystery out of it. And, you know, if anybody wants to reach out at any point, we do presentations. We also have a civic presentation that has been put together by our Student Advisory Board, our ambassador program. They did an amazing job. They're expanding through peer-to-peer groups. They're expanding into other schools. And we have a participatory budget project that we're doing in Trenton. I don't have all the details on it yet, but we are bringing the community together to decide on a project that they're going to do in Trenton. They get to vote, they're going to form committees, they get to decide how the money's being spent. So it's really a good thing. I'm excited about that. So we've got a lot going on, and I really appreciate my panel being here. You did a great job, but I did want to bring you together because you aren't, you know, the typical panel that we have in Trenton. Usually it's the experts sitting up here, and this time it's the folks that need to be heard. We have to start listening. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.